The internet promised us the renaissance of discourse, armed with instant access to all human knowledge and the ability to connect with brilliant minds worldwide. We imagined our online debates would elevate human understanding to unprecedented heights, but 2 decades later, we scroll through our choice of social prison, watching people with PhDs argue like kindergartners with a rogues gallery of anime avatar about whether water is wet or turning frogs gay. This is from a Medium article by Joan Westenberg, who is kind of questioning how you will never win an argument on the internet. But I'll put a pin in this and I'll get back to that at the end of the video. Today I want to talk about the forgotten art of arguing online, or how TMI is dead, long live online discourse. And now how the fuck have we ruined online discourse altogether is what I want to begin with, because I saw this one YouTube video which was talking about this and they gave us 4 reasons for why that might be. The first one was dualistic thinking, or black and white thinking, versus the underlying motive that people have for arguing online. That can range from anything from rage bait or just like fetching for clout, which should actually be relativistic instead, or the gray area that we should actually be in. The second was overgeneralization, which amplifies the us versus them mindset, the in-group and out-group mentality that people build against the people who are on the other side of the debate, instead of thinking about the debate as a issue to be dealt with by both the sides. Third was all or nothing thinking, or the assumption that there is no middle ground. I came across this one meme that said, I'd go vegan but cheese, and they replied that, okay, then go vegan but cheese. Yeah, that it's not always all or nothing, but that's how people see it on the internet. The fourth was person and identity and how it can get toxic. That is, how people associate their entire identity over what opinion they hold. That is infamously seen in politics. Next, I want to talk about this one article I read called Discourse and Social Media Activism, investigating the role of online discourse in promoting social change. They did like a quantitative analysis of social media data, and they found out that the role of engagement and followers was actually really important, and that kind of created the groupthink or the echo chamber effect that we see on the internet today. Another thing that they found was that they analyzed these discussions across language, discourse, communication, and network, and how it brought about a lot of other differences you would not really notice when you're a part of that discussion, but they also hold kind of an important stance on that. The next article I found was called The Role of Social Media in Shaping Political Discourse, a comparative analysis that was very cultural specific. They mentioned something in that was very fascinating to me. While it undeniably offers opportunities for greater participation and democratization, the challenges posed by polarization, misinformation, and potential manipulation cannot be ignored. To ensure that social media contributes positively to a democracy, a multi-stakeholder approach is necessary. This includes platform regulation, media literacy initiatives, fact-checking efforts, and increasing transparency from political actors. Ultimately, finding the right balance between freedom of expression and reasonability to combat harmful content will be crucial in shaping the future of political discourse in the digital age. Kind of shared what all needs to be done for political discourse to become better online. I will put another pin in this because we're coming back to politics again very soon. I'll jump into what the fuck is journalism doing here on social media. I found this one paper called Young Adults and the Future of News. They kind of talked about how there's a generation gap for how the previous generations used to view news versus how we as Gen Z view our news and where we get our news, how much trust there is in the news as well. The older generations obviously trust the television, newspapers a lot more than the Gen Z does. We trust social media and obviously online platforms way more than TV and newspapers. Along with that, there are changing expectations from journalism as well. Now, I came across this one YouTube video that's talking about yellow journalism. The clickbait journalism has come about to be. They're talking about how journalism used to be defined as the fourth estate of democracy. That is, it used to be like the guard to tell you what you need to know. How that has changed to journalism becoming a form of anachronism. A comment from that video also said that identity politics and the echo chamber mentality is leading people away from reliable news outlets. But when some of the biggest news outlets actually encourage this behavior, they are actively killing their own industry. When people actually gave into confirmation bias while they are anonymous online, they also kind of have lesser empathy for others that they are addressing on the internet. And I kind of fell into this rabbit hole of reading about how journalism has actually evolved, and I found this another paper called The Transformation of Journalism from Changing Newsroom Culture to a New Communicative Orientation. And they mentioned how the expectations have changed from journalism just being people who are aforementioned guards of the democracy to actual storytellers and content creators. And they've mentioned that newsrooms no longer serve a coherent audience but have to approach their different target groups at various levels through different routes in order to reach them, catch their attention, and increase audience loyalty and retention. Therefore, as the survey results underline, journalism has become more dialogue oriented and more open towards the online and social interaction of its audience. And that has led to new modes of communication as well. Example, social media. And they've also mentioned how there are like different frames of reference that make that differentiation in the expectations. First, the journalist's role. Second, the position of the respective organization in the wider journalistic field. Third, the function of journalism for the society as a whole. And that has led to increasing expectations towards dialogue and participation, which has further led to a different set of expectations towards journalists, even though the majority of the audience might not even be overtly interested in participating editorially, as most people are not or don't want to contribute to journalism. But it has also led to new roles in the newsroom, plus an unpredictable audience, because we are chasing something that we have never really chased before, and we don't really know how the audience is going to react to that. Another article I found was on new content formats and their impact, and they have mentioned a shift of what journalists do from actual journalism to storytelling, and the boundaries between journalist, creator, and consumer are disappearing, causing roles to increasingly overlap. I will put another pin in this and come back to that because it kind of relates to the concept of presumption as well. That is how social media basically works. We are not just consumers, we are its consumers and producers. Here is when I want to touch on to my second pin that I just put in, because that includes news as well as political stance that people hold. The importance of online discourse, especially in times of censored media controlled by governments, because how else are we going to get that information if we cannot really trust television news that we're getting or newspapers, because it's all controlled by the government. Next, I want to jump into asking people for moral judgment online. Like, where do we actually draw the line? What is TMI to me? What is acceptable for me to ask online? Here, I want to mention the infamous Reddit thread called r/am I the asshole. I have researched embarrassingly way too much about this. Found this one Medium article called "Am I the Data Greek Who Analyzed Reddit AITA Posts?" Yes. And I don't feel embarrassed about researching "Am I the Asshole" anymore because, well, some context, famous subreddit where people comment and vote their judgment based on like people's personal stories and conflicts. They can comment and say whether you are the asshole, YTA, not the asshole, NTA, everybody sucks here, no assholes here, NAH, and not enough information, info. They found out that majority of NTAs or not the assholes were like kind of fake AI posts, bots, or people posting for validation, etc. That kind of ruins the whole point of discussion, by the way. But a lot of philosophers are also researching Reddit's "Am I the Asshole?" And I found this one Vox article talking about that, the moral dilemmas that people face. The trolley problem, utilitarians dealt with that by saying that they believe that we should seek greatest happiness for the greatest number of people, and we have to consider everybody's happiness equally and not partially. Even though this solves the problems, they followed it up by saying that philosopher Patricia Churchland once told me that utilitarianism is unrealistic because there's no special consideration for your own children, family, friends. Biologically, that's just ridiculous. People can't live that way. Now, she said that with respect to the context that if you would move like on the other side of the world to help 20 orphans by leaving your 2 children, the writer has mentioned that while I would respect the decision of those who choose to save 20 orphans, I certainly wouldn't fault someone for acting in line with an impulse that is hardwired into them. So, am I the asshole? Like all debates in philosophy, this is also very undiscovered, and I don't like that. So now I want to jump into how the analysis of this moral judgment on Reddit was also stated by another paper. And they talked about 3 types of negative users on Reddit. The first was the explainer, or the users who argue what they did was not that wrong. Second was stubborn opinion, user who did not acquiesce to the prevailing opinion of the respondents. And third was the returner, users who repeatedly posted the same situation hoping to elicit more favorable responses. They kind of mentioned like an example for how the returners are used to responding to people, and I think that's really funny. I want to talk about how people have related online discussion platforms to third spaces. For some context, third spaces are like the social environment separate from home or the first place and work the second place, where people can gather for informal interaction and socialization. Spaces that foster a sense of community and belonging. Examples for that would include cafes, parks, libraries. And this one article talking about how Discord's design design encourages third place social media experiences, which I think is really fascinating. And they talked about how there are good third spaces that can be also made online and how there are really bad third spaces. They mentioned that the best of these spaces also do something subtler. They create the conditions for the right people to find each other. The neighborhood pub does this through location and habit. The best online spaces do it through culture, shared interests, and thoughtful design that surfaces compatibility rather than just proximity. Well-run Discord servers where voice channels can feel like a neighborhood bar at midnight, thoughtful niche Reddit communities where real friendships still form, support flows, and people who don't fit neatly into the mainstream find a place that feels like home. We kind of, as a community, have forgotten how to talk to humans online, especially with the increasing use of generative AI. These platforms still exist, and I think they need to exist for people to keep interacting online, and how that's becoming more important than ever. They've also mentioned that bad online spaces invert every virtue. Algorithmic feeds reward outrage and virality over dialogue. Likes and follower counts recreate the status hierarchies that third places are supposed to dissolve. Broadcast culture turns users into performers competing for attention. Heavy commercialization interrupts the flow of conversation with transactions. We can clearly notice the overlapping factors from what has ruined journalism here as well. It's the same things. Online engagement, it's the broadcast culture and commercialization of the content is what is kind of causing the doom of online communities, and we need to recognize that to fix that. I will put my last pin in this, I promise it's my last pin, and I'll get back to how we can actually end up fixing that. How we have kind of established how online communities are important, and I found this another paper called We Create, We Connect, We Respect, Therefore We Are, Intellectual, Social and Cultural Value of Online Communities. And they mentioned this one table, how it connects the intellectual value, social value and cultural value, and how that overall relates to the perceived value of the online community. And I think the importance of all three of those kind of go by each other, because we need an argument and we need an intellectual perspective for the argument to be formed. We need a social value or people to have like a social status in that discussion forum for them to actually participate, and we need to have a cultural value to actually govern ourselves and have a community culture that is healthy and not toxic to have a valuable online community. And that goes perfectly with like a Reddit thread that has its rules established and people who are actually like interested in arguing rather than just like bullshitting on others, and they hold a social value and they hold a cultural value and they're abiding by the rules. That is the dream. This paper also mentioned, one of the pins I put in earlier, how the prosumption characteristic of social media comes about to be. The term was coined by ToastforThought in 1980. I've talked about this in one of my previous videos if you follow. How that is related to social media as a whole. Value of the online community is kind of like the foundation of the social network and how people actually engage in that through producing that others are consuming. The entire community is kind of like a prosumer of the social network, if that makes sense. Next, I want to jump into TMI. What is too much information? What are we doing wrong here that's causing that? I found this one paper called TMI and the Transference, LOL, Psychoanalytic Reflections on Google Social Networking and Virtual Impingement. It's more so focusing on how it impacts psychoanalytic boundaries when people go to therapy, how they already look up their therapists online on Google or social media, and it kind of like breaks that boundary by giving them a new way of acquiring unwanted digital information into the clinical space. Why that is actually TMI is because psychoanalysis greatly relies on the predictable and like kind of a blank state environment. On the other hand, the internet is basically characterized by instant gratification and like transparency and exposure that overtly threatens this secure psychological frame. This is also seen in online discussions and in real life, that people are crossing boundaries by looking each other up online beforehand, or in a heated discussion, say they're looking up each other or targeting an area of their lives that they're not supposed to know about. So now I want to address the elephant that is in the room. Should we be arguing online? And I found the perfect YouTube video for this. And they're talking about this one subreddit called r/change my view, and how that subreddit is actually shown through research that has caused people to change their views. Yes, 2016 Cornell study by Chen Hao Tan actually shows very specific findings of how people are changing views. And they mentioned some ways for how to really analyze if someone is worth arguing with or not as well. If there's been like more than 5 rounds of back and forth, then it's not happening and it's not worth arguing. Second was that new perspectives make it more likely for people to change their minds. Third was that research can actually help people change their minds. And fourth was if someone uses we and not I, they are less likely to change their mind. I think that's so interesting because the way we address ourselves and others in our community kind of shows something subconscious about us. That kind of gives me flashbacks for back in the day when I didn't know how to read a room or how to read somebody's body language, and I used to just like say anything in any room, and that was so weird to me because I didn't understand what I did wrong, what everybody else in the room did. This last one kind of gives me that energy and I don't like it. So now to address my last spin, I found this Medium article that I talked about in the beginning of this video. It's called "You Will Never Win an Argument on the Internet and Here Is Why." And they've also mentioned like things to do instead of just arguing online. The first one is deep reading. Instead of arguing about books, read them. Instead of debating summaries, engage with primary sources. Build genuine understanding before entering discussions. Second is write to think. Use writing to explore ideas, not win arguments. Write essays, not tweets. Focus on developing your thoughts rather than defeating others. Third is controlled environments. Save serious discussions for spaces designed for learning rather than engagement. Book clubs, study groups, and moderated forums can create conditions for genuine discourse. Fourth is async over real time. Real-time debate optimizes for quick responses over deep thought. Async discussions allow time for reflection and reduce performative pressure. I love this article. I'm sorry, this article has everything I've ever needed. Of course, to end that article, they have mentioned, and for anyone interested, water isn't turning frogs gay. All frogs are gay. And that's all I have for you today. So please keep arguing and feel free to argue in the comments about anything you like or don't like, or any weird arguments you've heard online lately, because I've really not been coming across a lot of arguments and I don't like it. It's like a guilty pleasure reality TV show that I'm missing out on. I'm having FOMO over here. Please include me. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you. Bye bye.